Hi, I'm John Picarello, Chief Leadership Officer and co-founder here at Lions Pride Leadership Company. And today I want to talk to you about having boundaries. Boundaries in life are very important. And the three things we're going to talk about is boundaries are necessary and why you need to have them. Secondly, boundaries reduce stress. And thirdly, boundaries build strong relationships. And we have to have boundaries in our lives. You have to set parameters, personal, family, business, and so on. And I always start off with this analogy of owning property where you have large properties where sometimes there's no fences between properties, so neighbors can look down 3 or 4 properties and see each other. And that's okay as long as there's an understanding between everyone. But just take, for instance, and using this as an analogy about having boundaries in life, is that if you have a property and it's bordering your neighbor's property and there's no fence, and you discover one day that your neighbor has a dog and you like the dog, but the dog's been coming over to your property doing its business. And you don't like that, so what you do is you go out and you just clean it up and you don't say anything. And then if you have children, you want them to go out and play, you have to go out and check and make sure there's nothing that they're going to step in or fall in and so on. And over time, because you never said anything, you begin to have a resentment towards your neighbor. Now, they don't know this because you never said anything. And their dog continues to go out and just do their business on you. And finally, you can't take it anymore. And you decide, I'm going to fence the property. And you're fuming over this whole thing. And you go ahead and you fence the property around. Beautiful fence. You're happy with it. The dog's no longer visiting it. Then your conscience begins to bother you because you never said anything to your neighbor. And then also you're thinking, what is the neighbor thinking? That all of a sudden there's a fence here. For years we've lived side by side, no fence. Now we have a fence. And they might be thinking, maybe they're taking it personal. And maybe they don't like me now because I have this. And you're going through all of this in your mind. Meanwhile, maybe none of it is actually taking place. Maybe your neighbor actually likes the fence and they had no idea their dog was visiting your property. They thought the dog was going out in the back the whole time. And they don't have children, so they don't go out there and check all the time. They're not out there. So there's a whole different scenario, 2 different worlds, 2 different mindsets. But without the boundaries, here you are now, you're harboring resentment, not even realizing your neighbor knows nothing about it. Now your conscience is bothering you because now you feel terrible about putting a separation between you and your neighbor. So using that as a metaphor of having boundaries in life, boundaries are important because your personal space is important, your life is important, your business is important. So you need to have boundaries in life. And for instance, you need to have boundaries in your personal life. And who can come into your life? Who can visit your home? Who can call you up at any hour of the day or whatever? So you wouldn't want to not have boundaries. Then you'd have people come into your home, and if you don't say anything, they show up 10 o'clock one night, you don't say anything, and hey, you have a great time, and maybe you do, but you don't say, hey, maybe you can come a little earlier, and you don't say anything like that. Next thing, they come over 11 o'clock at night and stay until 1, 2 in the morning. If you don't say anything, you're going to have resentment toward them because they keep doing that. Meanwhile, they're not doing anything wrong because you never said anything. So you have to set boundaries. Same thing with personal boundaries, where just knowing what you should share, and some people ask questions and you might feel compelled to answer. Well, you don't have to answer every question. You don't have to tell everybody what you're feeling, what you're thinking. So you set boundaries. You set boundaries for friendship, boundaries for business acquaintances. Well, where's the boundary at business, the difference between interpersonal relationships, where you do get a little personal, but where do you draw the line? That's a boundary. But you need to have those so there's an understanding. There's a respect for one another that you don't cross the line. Because without boundaries, there'll be intrusions, there'll be impositions, and they may not be intentional. It's all because there was not an agreement to have boundaries. So secondly, the reason you need the boundaries is because it reduces stress. Boundaries reduces stress, just like in the story of having the dog. That person would have never had the stress they had in their life had they just went next door to the person they were living next door to for years, good friends, and say, hey, I noticed your dog had been coming over and doing their business and all that. Can you do something about that? Maybe just, curb your dog or go out there and just clean up and so on. I'm not going to tell you what to do on your end, but just in case they come on my end, I don't mind it as long as it's cleaned up, or whatever it may be. Maybe they'll put up a fence. But the thing is, keep in mind, if nothing's said, nothing gets done, and the stress factor begins to build up and it turns into resentment. And there have been parting of the ways, friendships, and even business partners because of boundaries that were never laid out, never stated, and the impositions went unaddressed for fear of offending someone. And in the end, both parties get offended because you have to part ways. So, boundaries will reduce stress. And also the third thing boundaries does is not only does it set the parameters for personal space or business space or whatever, and the lines of where you can go, where you shouldn't go, and also it reduces stress, but thirdly, boundaries build strong relationships. Because when you have an understanding with each other of what you can do, what you can't do. I mean, I've had friends from the South where they talk about refrigerator rights. And the first time I heard that, I had no idea. Refrigerator? What are you talking about? And it says, well, we're friends when you can come over my house and I don't have to say you can go in my refrigerator anytime you like. Well, I was brought up differently. And in my upbringing and in my culture, the way I came up, you went to somebody's house and you opened their refrigerator without asking permission. That's offensive. That's crossing the line. So there has to be an understanding about that. So for me, for that person coming to my house, I had to just say, listen, you're welcome to my house anytime within reason. Of course, there's hours where they know. But it's also, I really don't like when people go into the refrigerator on their own. If you need something, hey, you want to eat something, you're hungry, no problem. But the thing is, I'm the one who goes in the refrigerator and I'll tell you what I have and so on and so forth. It's just an understanding. There's no right or wrong, but it helps build a stronger relationship. But also the boundaries also go into the relationship as far as conversations. What's off limits? What do you don't mind being asked? What do you mind being asked? Also in your business relationships. There are people, the boundaries are set differently for each person because you're at different levels of relationships. So some people are welcome to ask certain questions. Other people are not. Some people can come to you and say, listen, what you did the other day, A, B, C, D, and so on. They have that freedom. Others may have to have a different approach, may have to have permission, ask you first, do you mind, and so on and so forth. So boundaries can build strong relationships. And think about that on the business end. Boundaries build strong team relationships, strong business relationships. And across the board, boundaries make life more tolerable, easier, and less stress. So I hope you set boundaries in your life, the ones that work for you, so you won't have resentment toward people that they don't even know about, because you need to speak up, and that's a boundary as well. Know when you have to speak up and when not to speak up. When is the law? Where is the line drawn? And make sure your friends, your family members, your co-workers, supervisors, subordinates, whoever they are, make sure they know where those boundaries are. So there'll be no stress on either end, stronger relationships, and you'll live a more secure, well-balanced life. So I hope that helped you today, and I hope you'll think about healthy boundaries in the future. And thank you for spending this time with me, and I trust it added value to you. See you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.